Okay guys, you're very welcome back to the vlog. Today finds me in my own house, not talking about photography this time, but talking about another hobby of mine. It is literature, and I've always been a big reader, especially since I left college back quite a few years ago. And at the moment I'm here sitting at home in what I consider my library. I've got about 3,000, maybe 3,500 books, mainly made up of novels, but also made up of plays. I've a shelf, well, not quite a shelf load, a whole kind of stack of shelves with plays in them as well too, as I've put on an awful lot of directed, produced and acted in an awful lot of plays as well. But moving on, no longer can I play soccer, so I've more time and now I've more time to be able to read. And the reason I'm here is to talk about the 6 books on the shortlist of the Booker Prize. Now, the Booker Prize is one of the most prestigious prizes in the world. It's an English-based prize, but it kind of encompasses all the countries that are in the British Commonwealth. Add in a few more with that, like South Africa, ourselves, and in the last 6 or 7 years, the United States of America, writers from those countries can now win the Booker Prize as well. Alas, if the book isn't let's say published in English, then I don't think, as its first language, I don't think that it's eligible for the Booker Prize. I stand corrected on that. So for instance, somebody, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, who is dead, but were he to let's say produce a book, it wouldn't be eligible for the Booker Prize, as it would originally have been written in Spanish, and so therefore non-eligible. Moving right along. So at the start of this year, there was 163, I could be wrong about that, but between 160 and 170 eligible books, and 4 or 5 judges have to sit down and they have to work their way through all of these books, long listing it to 13, shortlisting it to 6. Quite a surprise this year. Lots of people didn't predict the shortlist, mainly because there were several super books, Colony being one of them, and Maps of Our Bodies, I could be wrong about the name of that now, but something to that effect, were really tipped to make the shortlist and didn't make it at all. The Colony is actually an Irish writer who wrote that particular book based in Ireland. But to move on, I have this shortlist here, the 6 of them, and there are 2 Americans, 1 Sri Lankan, 1 Irish, just having a quick look, 1 English and 1 Zimbabwean. So yeah, quite an interesting mix, to be perfectly honest. Next Monday, the actual Booker Prize winner will be announced, and I'm just going to go very quickly through these books, tell you what I thought of them, and then afterwards try and predict, 1, tell you who I would pick as the winner, and 2, then try and predict exactly who will win, because what I think and what others will decide probably vary very much. Anyway, I'm going to start with the first book. A lot of you will have heard of Elizabeth Strout. Olive Kitteridge was one of our popular books. I think it might have won the National Book Award, and if not the National Book Award, then the Pulitzer Prize. She won both, one for My Name is Lucy Barton and the other one for Olive Kitteridge. This particular book is called Oh William, and if truth be told, I wasn't quite really looking forward to this particular book. I had read Olive Kitteridge and I read My Name is Lucy Barton. This is a follow-up of the Lucy Barton book, which also did exceptionally well over in the States with the, I think it won the National Book Award. This is a follow-up of it, and I thought to myself, you know what, I'm not going to enjoy this particular book. But I have to say, I really enjoyed this particular book. I thought it was a super book. Now, what's it about? Well, it's Lucy Barton, further on in life from her original book. She is still in touch with the father of her 2 children, her first husband, William, and he is quite a, well, some people say he doesn't have any personality. I actually quite enjoy him as a character, and maybe can relate to a certain amount of what he has to say and do, and certainly her as well too. And there was just lots of different kind of snippets of this book and parts of this book and thoughts and portrayals and things that they said that resonated with me, and I really enjoyed that. The book itself it reads very, very well, very crisply. You rip through it. You're always wondering what's going to happen next. Is it a long book? Not a particularly long book, to be honest. Yet I have to say it probably has a lot short. There's a lot shorter on the actual Booker Prize list this year. So going from, let's say, two classic books, which I thought so. You know, why did these win the Pulitzer Prize? Why did these win the National Book Awards? I came to this and I was thinking, well, nah, I'm not really looking forward to this, to be honest. Let's get it out of the way. And I really did enjoy it. So that's Elizabeth Strout, an American writer. What ends up happening is that Lucy Barton and her ex-husband William end up going on an adventure where William finds out that he's related to somebody who is still alive and never realised that he has been a sister that he never realised he had, and they head up to Maine, where Elizabeth Strout is basically from. Even though she used to live in New York for a long time, she's now gone back to live in Maine, but they've gone back up to Maine, and she realizes Maine is far more backward than she remembered. It's certainly not New York, and we get lots of different kind of pictures of a rustic rural area, and then finally they arrive back in New York. But I really did enjoy that particular book. I'll talk to you about it in the minute. So that's Elizabeth Strout. Second book on my list, technically this is the shortest book in pages. I think it's 138 pages, to be perfectly honest. I have to get the glasses out. Yes, 138 pages. Though it's not the shortest book, but it is the least amount of pages. There is a book that has less words, as it were, because even though it might have more pages, the writing is bigger, the writing is more spaced out, the lines are more spaced out. But this is the shortest book that has ever been nominated or shortlisted for the Booker Prize. So, interesting one. Now, Claire Keegan is a very interesting writer. She's from Wicklow, and a superb writer, a master craftsman. But what she actually does is she writes very short books. She doesn't feel the need to write long books. One of her other books is Foster, written in 2010. And then her next book after that was written in 2021. And yet it was only 138 pages. So I wouldn't say she's prolific as an actual writer, but her book Foster was filmed recently in Irish, called On Colleen Keown, and really got some rave reviews, and lots of people, I didn't get to see it myself, but lots of people went and thought very, very highly of it. Anyway, what's this book about? Well, it's based in Ireland. It's based in New Ross, not too very far from where I'm sitting at the moment. And also it's based just coming up to Christmas time. And a man called Bill Furlong, who's dropping off coal and timber to people in the New Ross area. He coming close to Christmas time, obviously he's a busy man, but he begins to notice things within this particular convent. And of course we're looking at the Magdalene laundries, and basically he has a kind of an encounter with a lady within the actual convent who's not there by choice, I think, and things begin to resonate, and he's kind of at home mulling over it and thinking about it. And I don't want to give too much of the story away, because there isn't an awful lot of a story there. Now, this was the one book that I had actually read before the Booker Prize list was announced, and I think I read it earlier in the year, the very start of the year, and I did feel that 138 pages, I was only kind of half getting into it when it finished, and I felt almost like when you're eating candy floss, that it looked fantastic, but then when I actually got into it, there wasn't an awful lot there. I mean, there wasn't an awful lot there from the point of view of I kind of was through the book and then it was finished. And I really felt, God, I wish that had gone on a bit more, and maybe 300 or 400 pages wouldn't have gone amiss, because I really tore through the book. It's exceptionally well written. Story resonates with anybody from Ireland, but I just felt a little short, and that might come against it when it comes to the actual Booker prize itself, whether it wins or not, because I think the quality of the writing is exceptional, and I think the actual storyline, and certainly in Ireland and probably in other countries, the Magdalene laundries and what went on there, and how a lot of a conspiracy that was kind of hidden really from people, and we're only really finding out about this in the last 15 or 20 years. It brings up lots of anger and memories for some people. I won't say anything more about that. Anyway, that's Claire Keegan. Okay, and now we've got The Trees. It's the second book from an American author. It's written by Percival Everest and it is based in Mississippi. And I have to say, I read this after another book I'll talk to you about later, which I didn't enjoy reading. And I'd heard that this particular book was, I think it's given something like 4.22 out of 5 on average in Goodreads, which is a very, very, very high average. And I was expecting a lot of it, and it didn't disappoint, because the first 60 or 70 or 80 pages are absolutely, one, hilarious, two, set up a fantastic scenario, and I'm beginning to think this writer is really in control of the story, the narrative. This is really going to develop. Unfortunately, from about page 80 to maybe 160 or 180, it just didn't take off, and it kind of plateaued, and we were rehashing the same thing again and again without advancing anywhere further. Basically, it's about white people being murdered in in Mississippi, in the American South, and these murders aren't just regular murders. There's a black man present in all of these particular murders, but the black man disappears from under the nose of the authorities. As to how that happens, we're not quite sure. So it's a detective mystery, really. The MBI, the Mississippi Bureau of Investigations, are involved, and they bring in the FBI and the local police, who are a bit of a kind of a Keystone Cops, are involved as well. And then the book starts turning very dark. And we realise that it isn't so much funny that these murders, copycat murders, begin. And then you realise the racist intonations and basically the theme, the racist theme, comes out in the book. And we have copycat murders in California, Miami, and the rest of the United States. I don't want to tell you about the ending. I'd have to say maybe it's a bit apocalyptic, and it's a bit probably OTT, and I'm not sure that it is as realistic as I would hoped. When you build up expectations so much, then you kind of wonder, well, why didn't it get there? And you're left down as a reader. So I would have been singing Percival Everest's praises, and he's a very experienced writer. I hadn't heard of him, in truth, beforehand, but a lot of people still hope that this might win. It didn't get 4.22 in Goodreads for being a bad book, but I just felt it built up expectations just a little bit too much, and then afterwards it kind of flattered to deceive, as it were. Having said that, a decent read all the same. Next up is the only African book in the actual shortlist. It's a book by No Violet Bulawayo, a very interesting name actually, not Violet Bulawayo, but No Violet Bulawayo, whether that's her real name or not. She's of Zimbabwean or Rhodesian in times past ancestry. And the book Glory tells about the leader Robert Mugabe. Now, it doesn't tell it directly. It mentions a different name, and it's very similar to Animal Farm, in the sense that the characters and the main characters are animals as opposed to being direct people. That didn't really affect it for me, to be perfectly honest. I just got on with it. She has a lovely style of writing, and we get the idea how really the populace and the population of the country are being fooled by all the leaders, and how Mugabe, who thought he was basically God's right-hand man, or God's man on earth, he could control the sun, really was, basically too old, and had served his time. The population and the country were destitute, really, and back in 2017 there was a coup d'etat. Though they didn't call it a coup d'etat, they said they were just taking over, and basically he was put in under house arrest within Zimbabwe. And so we get a lot of the history of Zimbabwe, and how his right-hand man, who had been basically ostracized and had to leave the country, came back and took over. And of course, is there much change? No, but he claimed that there would be an awful lot of change. The book gets better in the second half of the book. It gets more interesting. It brings in a particular exiled character who isn't any kind of a leader, is more of a writer, really, who comes back into the country. And the writing itself is lovely to read, but the actual, the actual syntax and all that, and the way that she writes, very nice. But it's a heavy subject, and there isn't any break from it. It's just constant, almost propaganda, and how the propaganda worked, page after page after page. So with 400 pages there, again, it's a heavy read, not just from the physical point of view, but from the actual topic point of view. It's quite a heavy read, but it's well pulled off, and it's a decent book for sure, without a doubt. Right, moving on. This is the interesting book in the list this year, written by the oldest ever shortlisted writer. Alan Garner is his name. He's 88 years of age. I had never heard of Alan Garner, but apparently he's kind of a fantasy science fiction novelist who has been writing for a long time, based in Cheshire in northern England. This really is probably his swan song. We can't say that for sure, but at 88, will he bring out too many more books? Having said that, he has brought this out. It is the shortest book word-wise ever written in shortlisted for the Booker Prize. Though it has, I think, 159 pages, it has less words than our original or earlier book that we looked at, that being Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan. But the writing, and I will show it to you, kind of well spaced out. I hope you can see that there, and not an awful lot on each page. So it's a very easy read. You can rip through it, and it tells the story of a young lad who's in his house. He lives by his chimney stack, and his name is Joe, and he's waiting for the ragman to come. And when the ragman arrives, he buys certain oddities from him, which take him into a kind of a story. The ragman is involved in the story somewhat. He appears and disappears again, and also Joe is almost like Cider with Rosie in a sense. He's kind of wandering around his own area. It isn't anywhere specific, but we take it that it's in some English-speaking area somewhere in the world. There isn't a location given. And yet at the end of the book, we're kind of left wondering, where are we? What are we doing? To be very honest, this particular book hasn't done well in the Goodreads. We're looking at maybe 3.3 out of 5, which is very weak, really. It's one of the lowest books you'll find in the Goodreads, and yet it was one of the big surprises that it actually made it from the long list, which it was a surprise that it made it to the actual shortlist. And believe it or not, it's the favourite to win with the bookies. They feel that maybe the judges are looking at it and saying, 88-year-old man, a fantastic writing career. Apparently some of his books, super. Never read any and couldn't name any for you, but apparently super. And yet here he is. There's a good chance that he may get it, and yet lots of people will. There's an element of Samuel Beckett there. Have we missed the plot, really? Is it the way that there's a touch of Waiting for Godot about this particular book? This kind of this pseudo reality. And of course, this is what this is like, this magical realism. I gotta be very honest, I ain't a magical realism person. I'm one of these people who enjoys a book that kind of, the simpler and the deeper it is, the better for me, so that I can go back and read back into it more and more. I think the same for a lot of people. That's why it didn't really fare too well, and took a bit of a hammering, really, when you go through the reviews on Goodreads, which is a bit of a pity. But well done to any man, first of all, to write a book and bring it out, and he's 88 years of age. And so, lads, we come to the final book, The Seven Moons of Mali Almeida. A lovely name, actually, and what a very striking book cover. Don't judge the book by the cover, they say, but unfortunately, people do, and this is certainly a very interesting one, cover-wise. So is the name. I'll try and pronounce it, and if I get it wrong, well, so be it. Shehen Karantilaka. Right, apologies for that, Shehen, for butchering your name. But anyway, based in Sri Lanka. And again, yes, the protagonist, Mali Almeida, has been murdered. I'm not giving away much on that, because he's murdered at the probably even before the start of this book. And he has gone to this kind of other world. And he has to travel through X amount of moons. And we're dealing with 7 moons, that is 7 lengths of time. I have to be honest with you, more magic realism here, and reminded me, to be honest, of one of the books that won the Booker Prize recently, George Saunders, the Lincoln in the Bardo, where we were dealing with a dead person walking around a graveyard. Here we're dealing with a dead person walking around a graveyard, but also visiting areas where he lived. Mali Almeida was a photographer, which was a little interesting for me, but he was a photographer working for basically any news agency that was willing to pay him. He didn't have any sides, be it with the Tamils or be it with the government or any other groups within Sri Lanka, and we learn a lot about the different groups within Sri Lanka. Now, I have it bookmarked there, close to about 100 pages, because I'm still trying to get through this. I have to say, it's a heavy read. I'm not mad about this magical realism and trying to work out where is he now, who is he talking to. There are an amount of characters within this particular book. The writing is good and it's vibrant and it's stimulating, but the storyline, at times you're wondering, where are we, what are we doing here now? And then you hit on a patch where you can get through 5 or 6 pages because it's pretty lucid, but then it loses that lucidity, and we're into kind of not quite sure where I am with this and where it's going. And we look at ghosts and ghouls and ghouls and whatever you want to pronounce them, and we have a whole load of different variations of them. So look, in short, I found it a bit overwhelming. I found it a difficult read, and times hard to make out what's happening, in truth. Hard to read between the lines. Maybe this is just me as a writer, or as a reader, should I say. Lots of characters as well too. Only maybe the protagonist and 1 or 2 others will remain in it for quite a bit, but I'm led to believe from the rest of the book, we're meeting, even after 100 pages, I'm meeting tons and tons of characters, and sometimes we're referring back to other characters and I can't remember who they were, and I'm having to jump back, and that breaks my rhythm when it comes to a book. I just feel I need, simplicity and depth are for me more important. But anyway, the one thing about this book, and the reason I kept it to last, is I have a feeling it's going to win. And I have a feeling it's going to win because of the fact that it too has done exceptionally well on the Goodreads. So maybe it's me. It's got about 4.33 in the Goodreads out of 5, and with an average reading of about 20,000 readers or 20,000 people reviewing, and even more putting in a score. That's very, very high. So I will continue to read it up until, I'm sure it's going to take me another week or two to get it finished. I find it very slow work, and what I tend to do is put it down, move on to another book, maybe come back to it and try reading it a little bit more. I'm just finding that type of book. Anyway, one of the reasons I suppose I've just referred to that. It reminds me a bit of Salman Rushdie's Midnight Children, which again, magical realism, and you never know where you are. And I suppose anytime you read it, again, most books depend on the mood you're in, but this one very much does. How much focus have you? What did you notice this time? You could read it again 2 or 3 different times and take an awful lot of different things out of it. Normally that's very good in a book, but for me, I'm not a big fan. So, will the judges go for, let's say, the books that have won several years ago? I think about 2010. Howard Jacobson's The Finkler Question won, and again, a big surprise that this style of book won it. To me, no, it didn't happen. I wouldn't be a fan. And unfortunately, I spent maybe a week or 2 reading George Saunders' Lincoln in the Bardo, which are a week or 2 I can't get back in my life. Again, I really did not enjoy either of those 2 books. Or could they go like they did last year and pick the brilliant writer Damon Galgut and his book, The Promise, or go to the likes of Julian Barnes, who won it in the noughties, I think 2008, 2009, that area. The Sense of an Ending, a book I think I've read 3 or 4 times. Simplicity, so easy to read, yet you're walking away thinking, what was that about? And you're thinking of the deeper meanings that were there in the book, and it resonates with you and it's in your head. 2 fantastic books, and yet both easy to read as well. So, who would I like to win? Well, to be perfectly honest, the first 2 books that I tackled, I do hope one of these wins it, because I think they're very readable books. Elizabeth Strout O'William would be my own personal choice, and secondly, Claire Keegan, a local writer here in Ireland. Small Things Like These, a very good book, albeit probably a little short, to be perfectly honest. If The Sentimentalist gets their choice, then Treacle Walker by Alan Garner, and the bookies, of course, too, if they get their choice, will win. But I think it'll be a very unpopular winner, and though he may end up being another Samuel Beckett, I don't feel that it's a book for the people. Some people have said it's great to hear it read as opposed to actually read it, because it's a poetic book. There's a lot of word creation, word sounds, and it's not so much what the actual word is, but how it sounds. That's important. Again, maybe that's not what I want in a book. I would think that The Trees won't win it. I just personally don't think it's strong enough to win it. I think it's the rank outsider, and the bookies have made it the rank outsider. But I would think that maybe Glory is a possibility. It wouldn't surprise me. The one thing that might go against it would be that there was a South African winner last year in the book Damon Galgut, The Promise, a South African writer. So therefore, would they go back to, even though it's not South Africa, it's a neighbouring country, Zimbabwe, would they go back there again? One wonders. But again, should they be worried about location? The strength of the book should be the book itself, not where the writer was from or where the subject matter is about. So I wonder. I feel in my bones this will win. I think that has a good chance, and as I said earlier, I hope one of these 2 will win, either Elizabeth Strout or Claire Keegan. Okay, so they're the 6 books. I hope you enjoyed my little brief synopsis of them. If you've read some of them and you disagree completely or you agree, please put a comment in the actual comments box underneath. I'd be dying to hear what you think about certain books. Listen, this is art, and a bit like photography and a bit like, you know, painting. One man's meat is another man's poison. So, you know, what I love, somebody else will hate. What somebody else loves, I won't think much of. So we'll see how it goes. Thanks for listening. If you liked what you saw, please give me a like. It certainly helps develop the channel. And if you haven't subscribed yet, well, why not subscribe? You never know what will come on this channel. Talk to you soon. Thanks for joining me.